3 successive lead investigators have tried for over 10 years to solve a potential Jane Doe murder case. There are no reports, no witnesses, no leads, not even a name. All they have are human skeletal remains that were washed ashore and scattered around Gilbert Island near Fredericton, New Brunswick. Fall 1992. A duck hunter travels to the island to build a blind. It's a wild, uninhabited place, isolated from the rest of the world by the waters of the St. John River. Suddenly, in a pile of dead branches and driftwood, the hunter makes a grisly discovery. Unaware of the consequences for the investigation, he moves the skull and goes to notify the police.
I'm already beginning to think, how did it get there? Along the St. John River system, there have been occasions that the old burial grounds were close to shore, and we have had occasions where some of them have washed away. So you have to think that. You have to think, is it a missing person? You have to think, is it foul play?
RCMP Corporal Dave Brown and Joseph Hine, a forensic technician, accompany the hunter to the island. If the hunter really has found human remains, the investigation is liable to be complicated.
The skull was actually in the crotch of a branch of a tree. The gentleman that had found it had picked it up and put it there so he would be able to find it again.
The skull is not complete. The entire lower jawbone, or mandible, is missing along with several teeth. There is nothing left on the bone, not a shred of flesh. Joseph Hine takes the skull to the forensic lab.
We still don't know what we have. We don't know if this is a suicide or an accident or a murder. So you treat it like a murder until you know otherwise.
The hunter shows the investigators where he actually found the skull.
It's quite a big island. They put cows on there in the summertime to graze, so it's fairly big. I'd be taking a wild guess, but I'd have to say 30 or 40 acres anyway. But it floods almost completely in the spring. Like, I would say virtually the entire island is underwater in the spring. The three of us just had a look around, just a cursory look about 100 yards around the skull to see if we could find any other bones or any other indication of a body, and we didn't find anything.
Moira McLaughlin is a forensic anthropologist from St. Thomas University in Fredericton. Investigators assist her in the search of the island for more remains.
This river is deceptive. It looks very wide and peaceful and beautiful, and yet the actual channel of the river is quite narrow. Most of what we see is overflow. The current in the channel is exceptionally strong. Remains, a body could be carried very, very rapidly, many kilometers in hours.
The island is subject to flooding. It's possible the water either deposited the skull there or carried the skeleton downriver.
And as we were coming up to the backside of the island, I saw a nesting pair of eagles, and I think that'll always remind me, and in retrospect, it was rather prophetic.
Before starting the search, the team examines the island and discusses a plan of attack. The search team consists mostly of volunteers. They receive clear instructions to protect the scene and preserve the tiniest pieces of evidence.
In an area that we thought perhaps would be outside of the area that we might have to concentrate on, we started locating small bones. And as the search progressed, as we're going down the grid, we noted that we were finding more and more.
Among the bones, the search team also finds tattered remains of clothing.
The underwear and the sock were in such a condition that they really told us very little, other than bones were found in them. So we were able to deduce that they were on at the time of death. So that's an important clue.
After several days, the team discovers what looks like a little ball of animal fur or human hair. The little hair will be carefully retrieved and sent to the forensic laboratory.
And as we walked upstream along the island, this scattering of bones became more and more narrow until we found an area where there was a lot of dead branches and debris. And in that pile of dead branches and everything else, we found some of the larger bones. And the area where the skull was found was quite a distance from this fanning out. So the water had moved it quite a distance, actually.
Finally, an almost complete skeleton has been collected.
Maybe 80% of it. There was, the feet weren't there, but they're very small bones and they're so light that they could be carried away. Where the postcranial body was, that is, everything below the cranium was found, had been flooded many times. And those little bones of the hands and the wrist and of the feet and the ankles would easily have been swept away.
The water has hidden a key piece of the puzzle, the lower jawbone. Without that, it will be next to impossible for a forensic expert to determine the shape of the face.
We did several searches of the island. We never did find the jaw because, water took that away. It took away the important thing.
The police have not found any distinctive marks on the bones. No personal items other than clothing. No concrete evidence that could help them identify the victim.
There's a very big challenge here. You're not only challenged as a police officer to determine was there a crime, and if so, who committed it. The challenge is also the identification. Who is this person? You have a mystery.
Identifying the victim is crucial. Once that's done, the investigators will be able to construct probable scenarios to explain how the skull came to be on the island.
The person could have come out by themselves, by boat, died there by whatever means, and the boat floated away or whatever. Or somebody could have brought the individual out there and maybe killed the person there. Or a body could have floated up there out of the water. There were all those possible scenarios, and you can't dismiss one or the other so early in the case.
Moira McLaughlin tackles the job of examining the bones to try and build a biological profile of the victim, a kind of preliminary sketch for the police. She starts by delicately cleaning the bones, just enough so that she will not miss any clues, like the marks of trauma that might point to a murder.
I'm always quite careful about how much cleaning there should be, especially bones that I know have been immersed in water for a while, because bones can soften if they're in water for a long period of time. So judicious cleaning, laying it out in anatomical order, and then doing an inventory of the remains.
Investigators ask her to determine if the skeleton is male or female.
None of these determinations are 100% because the traits that we use for determining sex appear at puberty and develop during puberty, and there have been cases where there has been such an imbalance in the hormones that somebody who was actually biologically a female skeletally looked to be a male. We were fortunate in this regard to have the pelvis. So all of the traits pointed clearly towards it being a female.
McLaughlin compares the skeleton's measurements to standard human growth patterns to determine how old the woman may have been.
So in adult skeletons and skeletons that have completed their growth, we tend to find ages in decades or even in 20 years, to say somebody is between 40 and 60, for example. In this particular case, there was just an indication that this individual was at the end of their skeletal growth. And so we were able to say that we could put the skeleton in the area of early to mid-20s.
The next thing to determine is the woman's racial background. This is done by measuring the size and shape of the skull, particularly around the eyes and nose. Identifying race from skeletal remains is not an exact science. Nonetheless, after taking dozens of measurements, Moira McLaughlin arrives at a conclusion.
In the first analysis, the morphological traits pointed towards this individual being Caucasian.
The examination of the skeleton has revealed one particular feature of the victim that should make it much easier to identify her.
The left humerus, that is the upper arm bone, was smaller both in length and in thickness than the right humerus. It would have been noticeable in the individual, and in fact probably would have reduced the ability of that individual to use their arm. Every indication was that she was probably born with it, that it was a genetic abnormality.
Police used the information collected by McLaughlin to produce an identification record for the victim. Then she'll be added to the missing persons database. Not only is she added to the database, but she is compared to all the other women who have been reported missing in the country. Dave Brown can use these characteristics to shine new light on the local investigation. Leads slowly begin to come in that may help identify this woman with no name. Dave Brown gets calls from investigators in New Brunswick, Quebec, and Maine. Investigators now look at the woman's teeth for more clues to her identity. Dr. David Sweet is a forensic odontologist. He will examine the teeth that have remained in the skull and create a profile. It can be used much like a fingerprint to help identify someone.
We do an examination of the person's teeth and we produce a dental record, much the way a dentist would in a private practice.
This dental profile of the victim can be compared to the dental record of a missing person.
There's no national database for missing persons' dental records. That would be very helpful, but it's not present. And so instead, what we use is circumstantial evidence found at the scene of the crime. There may be some clue that leads us to believe that this certain person is the one that's dead. Then we can go to their medical record, their dental record, and we can obtain from their dentist any records that might be useful to compare to the teeth that are present in the victim's body to see if those records match.
Dr. Sweet can only make a partial report because he only has the upper jaw. But he observes that the victim has had intensive dental care to correct major problems with her teeth, and that her front teeth protruded. Dave Brown looks at the clothing found during the search of the island. Although the black jeans and white blouse are in poor condition, they will produce some facts.
There was very little left of the blouse and the jeans. They were mostly rotted. But we were able to find the labels. So one of the things that I wanted to do, and that's getting back to where's the person from, is there any clue that is going to help us, was to look to determine where were these bought? Are these something that are available everywhere? Are they even Canadian?
The Canadian Garment Association refers Brown to a number of manufacturers and retailers. He systematically contacts each one. It's a slow job that requires patience and perseverance.
Through many attempts and photographs that were sent to them, I was able to determine that the blouse was made by a Montreal company, and it was only out to one chain of stores, which was a Bargain Harold's stores. And I was able to determine when they were shipped, and at what time. And it was actually only a 2-month period that those blouses were shipped out to the Bargain Heralds. So therefore that gave me some idea of, okay, does that person live around those areas that have Bargain Heralds? So it's a way of just narrowing down the search somewhat.
Moira McLaughlin once again examines the bones. This time, she will try to determine a cause of death. Even without organs and tissue, the bones can reveal many clues. McLaughlin looks for signs of trauma, healed fractures, and even teeth marks that may have been left by a predator.
I was also looking for evidence of perimortem trauma. Bone breaks in different ways. If the bone is fresh and it still has all the fat and water in it, it will break, it will bend, it will respond in a very different way than if the bone is dry and it has been out on the surface for a long period of time and all the fat and water is gone from it. So I should be able to tell the difference between a fresh bone response and dry bone response. And if it's fresh bone and it shows no sign of healing, that's what we refer to as perimortem.
McLaughlin notices marks on some of the ribs. She can't be certain if these marks were caused by the teeth of an animal like a coyote or by the point of a weapon like a knife. Was it suicide, an accident, or homicide? The cause of death remains a mystery. The results of her examination are inconclusive. Years in the river have done a good job of blurring the facts. Damage caused by the water continues to keep the woman's identity a secret. The forensic lab has completed the analysis of the hair. Will the results prove the hair is from the victim or a predatory animal?